व्यंजन में वो लिंक लिंक वहाँ से ले लिया मैंने, क्लास स्टार्ट कर दी है। ठीक है। जो मेरे वाली लाइव होगी उसको भेजो। ठीक है। Hi, so good evening to all of you. Today there was some technical error on the portal, so that's why we have shifted to YouTube, all right? And I hope from the portal you would have downloaded this PPT. PPT will be uploaded, right? So today I'll be starting with world history. In world history specifically, there are some important topics which we'll cover today. Today we'll be covering roughly 4 to 5 questions. So in world history, the topics that are priority for me for today, number one, it is enlightenment. So we'll cover certain questions from PYQ, okay, in enlightenment. Then we'll talk about socialist ideas. Then we'll go towards American Revolution. And then we'll go towards French Revolution. So these are the 4 prime topics. These are the 4 topics which I'll be covering today, okay? And let us try to understand how to get the best control over answer writing, okay? So we'll start with the first topic. The first topic is going to be about enlightenment. Now let me help you out with the process. How we're going to go ahead with the process. Let us try to understand that. So what all of you are going to do along with me, that I will give you a question and you will try to write about it, okay? So if I'll say that this is the question, write an introduction. So try to write an introduction in 2 minutes, okay? Then I'll say what should be written in the body structure. Then you'll think about it, that what should be written in the body structure of that. Can you remember name of 1 or 2 historians which we can put in that specific question? And finally, then you will think about how to go with the conclusion. So at every stage we will stop, at every stage we will think, and then I'll give you the answer also side by side, okay? So please see the first question. The first question that we have is this. Okay, this was the question of 2024. UPSC has asked this question in the exam. So please let us read the question. Number 1, the ideas raised by the Enlightenment thinkers were profoundly unsettling and challenging to the old regime, society and political order. Critically examine. So this question is of 10 marks. It's a question of 10 marks. That means we have to write 2 pages. And we have to draft our answer, okay? For drafting our answer, we have to start with an introduction, then we have to go for the body structure, and then finally we'll go towards the conclusion. And side by side, we'll also see which specific historians we can use here. And that's going to be the overall broader sense of our idea. Plus, side by side, I'll also give you 2 more questions which you can write on your own, okay? Which will be from the PYQ, which will be more or less very similar to this theme. All right, so please think, see this question and try to write an introduction. Already I have given you an introduction, but we'll discuss about that. But first, please try to think. The ideas raised by Enlightenment thinker were profoundly unsettling and challenging to the old regime, society and political order. Critically examine. So this is the question, okay? What should be our introduction? So please think about it, and then I will explain what should be the ingredient of a good introduction. And then we'll also think that the introduction that I've given you here, what are the qualities of this and how you can also think on the similar lines, okay? So please take 2 minutes, and in 2 minutes, I would like all of you to write an introduction. That's why this is the logic of live answer writing. If you will write side by side, it will improve you, okay? Please don't be passive. If you will be passive, it will not improve you as a person with respect to answer writing. So please write along, okay? So if you have any doubt, you can use the comment box, all right? You can write your comments in the chat box and I'll read them and I'll understand, and side by side I'll give you the answers also. So please think about it. What could be the good kind of introduction? Okay, so one thing which is clear, okay, one thing which is clear in this question is that we can write an introduction on enlightenment itself. We can explain the basic meaning of enlightenment, and then eventually in the second part we can go towards what were those ideas which these thinkers came out with and how it became unsettling eventually. So that is going to be the sequence, okay? That is going to be the sequence of how to write an answer to this. Alright, so I hope by now all of you must have understood what should be the introduction. Let us now discuss in detail. Now, if we see this question, the question is about ideas raised by Enlightenment thinkers, meaning we're largely talking about the age of Enlightenment. So the introduction can be very brief. It could be about the age of enlightenment. Like in this case, like we've given you this, that 18th century, okay, that enlightenment was an 18th century European intellectual movement that placed reason, scientific inquiry and individual rights over tradition and authority. Previously what had happened, like before the 18th century, the ancient regime which was there in Europe, this ancient regime was largely giving focus to authority, like the authority of the political class, absolute monarchy, the authority of the church, the dominance of the church. So now both these things, the political class, social class, religious class, they were now getting unsettled. Why? Because this was the age of reason. So always use this keyword. Number one keyword always you have to remember for the enlightenment is age of reason. Number two, along with age of reason, please you can mention about scientific inquiry. And number three, the focus now was on individual rights. Okay, the concept of fundamental rights was now going to become very, very important. And this is exactly what you can use in the introduction. Side by side, you can also mention it encouraged people to question monarchy, church dominance, as well as social hierarchy. The courage, okay, the courage which the people got from the 18th century helped them, like if we see from the point of view of Immanuel Kant, Immanuel Kant used to say that enlightenment was the age where the people realized that they have the real power, where they started using their own intellect rather than being dependent upon the other authorities. So this is something which we need to remember for the examination. Whenever question comes on enlightenment, in the introduction, try to find out the keyword of reason. Number two, focus on individual rights. And very importantly, here you can even add the quote of Immanuel Kant, where Immanuel Kant, like, and this is given in your PYQ, okay? We'll upload the booklet जिसके अंदर सारे PYQ लाइन से दिए हुए हैं, एंड उसी बुकलेट के अंदर से आपको ये कीवर्ड मिल जाएंगे सारे के सारे, ठीक है, कि भाई किस तरीके से PYQ में UPSC ऐसे क्वेश्चंस पहले पूछ चुका है और सिर्फ क्वेश्चन से हम ये कीवर्ड निकाल सकते हैं, ठीक है, दैट इट वाज द अबाउट इंटेलेक्चुअल मैच्योरिटी ऑफ द मैनकाइंड. So whenever you write an introduction about 18th century, please use these keywords. Now introduction is fine. अब आगे इसको किस तरीके से डील करेंगे इस क्वेश्चन को, ठीक है. एंड इन इंट्रोडक्शन विच आर द स्पेसिफिक थिंग विच यू कैन मेंशन, जैसे कि हम पहले भी बात किया था, यू कैन गो विद डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ अप्रोच, एनालिटिकल, कंटेक्चुअल, कुछ थीसिस के बारे में बात कर सकते हो, और देन यू हैव टू ऑलवेज गो टुवर्ड्स द ट्रांजिशन. तो यहाँ पर हमने क्या किया, एक स्पेसिफिक डेफिनेशन वाला पार्ट, उसको आप चाहो तो लिख सकते हो कि भाई एनलाइटनमेंट अपीयर्ड एज अ ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव फोर्स दैट रीडिफाइंड यूरोपियन आइडियाज ऑन पॉलिटी, सोसाइटी एंड नॉलेज बाय गिविंग प्रायोरिटी टू ह्यूमन रीजन ओवर द inherited kind of traditions. So that's about your introduction, अगर आप इस तरीके से लिखना चाहते हो. Second, you can specifically mention the places where we see the more rise of enlightenment ideas. जैसे कि आप चाहें तो you can mention about the countries like France. Like France was one of the most volatile state, and at the same time it was largely having that unsettling because of large number of ideas. People like Montesquieu, Voltaire, Rousseau, they were the undercurrents of these ideas of enlightenment, or this age of enlightenment. And what were these people trying to handle? Okay, what were these people trying to change? They were trying to change the established institutions of monarchy, church, as well as the societal order. That could be also be discussed. And finally, what was the broader perspective about the whole rights that we're talking about in the age of enlightenment? They're about scientific inquiry, they're about individual rights, right? They're about the broader level of basic things which the humans were looking for, like right to profession, right to property, okay, right to freedom of speech and expression. All these things became the basic premise of the 18th century. So in the introduction, it's always better कि आप इनमें से कोई भी एक तरीका अपना लीजिए, ठीक है, कोई भी एक तरीका अपना लीजिए. It is going to create better impression in front of the examiner, है ना, उससे एक अच्छा इंप्रेशन क्रिएट हो जाएगा. सो अच्छा होगा अगर आप इस चीज़ को समझ लें. तो इंट्रोडक्शन तो देखो चलो हो गया, इसके बारे में अब ओवर एक्सप्लेनेशन नहीं करते हैं. इंट्रोडक्शन हम आराम से कर सकते हैं. क्वेश्चन था, द आइडियाज रेज्ड बाय एनलाइटनमेंट थिंकर्स वर प्रोफाउंडली अनसेटलिंग एंड चैलेंजिंग टू द ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी एंड पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर, क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन. अब हमें सेकेंड पार्ट में ये डिस्कस करना है, व्हाट वर दोज आइडियाज and why they were unsettling for both political as well as social order. तो थोड़ा सा सोच के देखिए, okay, just do a little bit of brainstorming, थोड़ा सा please 1 मिनट लीजिए and think about it कि what were those ideas and specifically how they became unsettling both for the societal order as well as the political order. This is what the question is asking about, right? So what were those ideas? So ideas को connect करने की कोशिश करिए. Society was based upon which principle? Society was based upon the principle of privileges at this point of time. Society was based upon the concept of tradition, that whatever is going on for thousands of years had to be continued. These two things were now going to suffer a lot because of the new ideas. Political order, it was based upon absolute monarchy. It was based upon the dominance of aristocrats. राइट अगर हम बिल्कुल बेसिक लेवल पे ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग करें तो दिस इज व्हाट वाज द सोसाइटल ऑर्डर एंड द political order and how these ideas were going to now challenge this societal as well as the political order. So here we can write about the ideas of the philosophers themselves. Like societal order का अगर हम बात करें तो Rousseau had discussed about the concept of equality. He was one person who said that society has become unequal based upon artificial parameters. The concept of private property is being responsible for inequality for the system of privileges. So that was attacked by Rousseau. Similarly, if we see the writings of Voltaire, Voltaire was someone who questioned the dominance of tradition. So he wanted that there should be focus on free will. Okay, they should be focused on free will. Too much of dominance of the church should not be there. We talk about Montesquieu. Montesquieu, all of you know, was supporter of separation of power, which affected the political system. Okay, Rousseau gave the theory of social contract. So in this question, these are the two things which you have to interlink. The question is saying, okay, let me just show you the question one more time. Why we are saying the question time and again? So that you can learn this habit. Look, whenever I used to write answers in the examination, I used to keep the question paper in front of me. Sometimes we do get digressed, है ना? तो कोशिश करना है कि exactly अच्छे तरीके से हम उसको solve करना सीखें. So introduction easy है, structure को समझो अच्छे तरीके से कि भाई the ideas raised by enlightenment thinkers. कौन कौन से thinkers हैं हमारे पास? फ्रांस के 3 फेमस थिंकर्स हैं, मॉन्टेस्क्यू, वोल्टेयर, रूसो. इंग्लैंड से भी हमारे पास थिंकर्स हैं जिनमें सबसे फेमस है जॉन लॉक, जो लिबर्टी के बारे में बात करते हैं. ठीक है, तो दीज थिंकर्स सिमिलरली अगर बाकी और चीज़ों के बारे में बात, सपोज इकोनॉमिक्स के बारे में आता है तो एडम स्मिथ का भी नाम यूज़ कर सकते हैं, बट यहाँ यूज़ करने की जरूरत नहीं है. हमें ज़्यादातर उन्होंने 2 चीज़ों के बारे में पूछा है, ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी एंड पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर. सो हुएवर थिंकर हैज टॉक्ड अगेंस्ट देम द करंट स्टेट ऑफ अफेयर्स, उसको आप यहाँ पे यूटिलाइज कर सकते हो. This is how we are trying to do the brainstorming. These are the two things which are to be linked. How the ideas which came during this time period were unsettling for the societal and the political order. This is very, very important linkage in this question. ठीक है, तो प्लीज़ ऑल ऑफ यू, सिंस ये लाइव वाला कोर्स है, कोशिश कीजिए साथ में ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग करने की. ओके, हियर आई एम नॉट हियर जस्ट फॉर द सेक ऑफ पैसिव आपके सामने आंसर रीड करके दिखाऊं. दैट इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी यूजफुल फॉर ऑल ऑफ यू. सबसे अच्छी चीज़ क्या होगी अगर आप मेरे साथ साथ ये सोचने की कोशिश करें. दिस इज अबाउट डेवलपिंग थिंकिंग, डेवलपिंग कंटेंट, डेवलपिंग हिस्टोरियोग्राफी, एवरीथिंग एट वंस. एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली एक स्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करना सीखे. दिस क्वेश्चन डिफिकल्टी लेवल इज ईजी. टेलिंग यू वेरी फ्रेंकली, इस क्वेश्चन का डिफिकल्टी लेवल सबसे इजी लेवल का क्वेश्चन है. वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री में इतने आसान क्वेश्चन कभी कभार आते हैं, और वो भी बिल्कुल डायरेक्ट लेवल का. आप देख लीजिए, इंट्रोडक्शन आपने लिखा, सेकंड पार्ट में आपने लिखना है कौन सा सोसाइटल और पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर है, थर्ड पार्ट में आप लिखते हैं तो कैसे आइडियाज ने उसको चैलेंज किया. फिर सिंस द क्वेश्चन इज सेइंग क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन, हम ये भी लिख सकते हैं टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट these ideas which came during the 18th century were literally getting implemented. जैसे कि एक कोट आपको सबको पता होगा, It was from Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant कहते हैं that Voltaire was living in the age of enlightenment, but the age itself was not enlightened. What's the meaning of that quote? The meaning of that quote is very clear. उसका meaning क्या है कि भाई आइडियाज तो थे बट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन नहीं हो पाया. बहुत कम केसेस में हमने इम्प्लीमेंटेशन देखा. उसका सबसे बड़ा एग्जाम्पल क्या है? फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन. ठीक है, उसका सबसे बड़ा एग्जाम्पल क्या है? फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, टू सम एक्सटेंट इवन द अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन. तो वो हम कंक्लूजन के लिए सोच के रखेंगे. ठीक है, वो हमें कंक्लूजन या उससे जस्ट पहले के वाले पार्ट में उसको हम लिखेंगे. बट जो मेन बॉडी स्ट्रक्चर है, इट इज अबाउट लिंकिंग व्हाट वर द established order in society and politics and what were these new ideas. तो चलिए एक बार मैं आपको अब थोड़े से और पॉइंट्स दिखा देता हूं जो हमने थोड़ा सा डिस्कस किए हैं. आप सब लोगों के साथ ये पीपीटी शेयर हो रही है. ठीक है, मेरा सब लोगों को यही कहना है कि प्लीज़ इसको अच्छे तरीके से पढ़ना चालू करो और आंसर राइटिंग साइड बाय साइड करो. डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द टॉपिक विल गिव यू 2 सजेस्टिव क्वेश्चंस टॉपिक बाय टॉपिक. ठीक है, इंट्रोडक्शन हमने डिस्कस कर लिया. अब आप देखिए, ठीक है, अगर हम बात करें सेकंड पार्ट की तो हम पहले किसके बारे में लिख सकते हैं? 2 चीज़ें इन्होंने पूछी है, ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी एंड पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर. तो हम पहले किसके बारे में लिख सकते हैं? ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी. हेडिंग हमने बनाई, इम्पैक्ट ऑफ एनलाइटनमेंट थिंकर्स ऑन ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी. ठीक है, कैसे चैलेंज किया? तो यहाँ पे हम बात करेंगे अबाउट रूसो एंड रूसो और उनकी बुक का, और जो भी उन्होंने लिखा है, जो भी उन्होंने पब्लिश किया है, उसका नाम लिखो. इट विल इंक्रीज ऑथेंटिसिटी. ठीक है, जैसे डिस्कोर्स ऑन द ओरिजिन ऑफ इनइक्वालिटी, ही हैज आर्ग्यूड दैट ऑल मैन वर बोर्न फ्री एंड सोसाइटी इक्वालिटी वाज इमर्ज्ड ड्यू टू आर्टिफिशियल प्रिविलेजेस. दिस डिसमिस्ड द नोबल स्टेटस एज ह्यूमन मेड क्रिएशन रेदर देन अ नेचुरल ऑर्डर. तो इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ? सोसाइटी के अंदर चेंज आने वाले थे. एंड नेक्स्ट इसी को ही आगे लिखते हैं विलियम डोयल. नाउ दिस इज द हिस्टोरियन दैट वी आर लुकिंग फॉर, राइट? सो ही पॉइंटेड आउट दैट सच आर्ग्यूमेंट created a moral crisis within the nobility itself because it made privilege appear unjust and indefensible. Means the system of privileges became the biggest challenge. System of privileges became the biggest problem which was to be challenged by the others. और इन्हीं ideas ने उसको सबसे ज़्यादा challenge किया कि भाई this is not an order which should be continued for the long run. तो ये हमारा फर्स्ट पॉइंट इसमें हमने लिख दिया. सेकंड, वी कैन टॉक अबाउट अदर राइटर्स ऑल्सो, जैसे डिड्रॉट है. ठीक है, इनका नाम याद रखिएगा. ही वॉज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर एडिटिंग द फेमस टेक्स्ट ऑफ एनसाइक्लोपीडिया. सो एनसाइक्लोपीडिया को एडिट करते थे एंड ही वाज समवन हु वांटेड दैट एवरीबॉडी शुड बी इक्वल. ओके, एंड इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ? वी सी अंडरमाइनिंग ऑफ द अरिस्टोक्रेटिक कल्चर कि व्हाई डिड दीज अरिस्टोक्रेट वर अबव एवरीवन एल्स, उसको उन्होंने क्वेश्चन किया. अब आप इसके थ्रू समझिए. ठीक है, अब आप एक थोड़ा सा डायग्राम के थ्रू समझिए कि हम किन किन चीज़ों के ऊपर स्ट्रेस कर सकते हैं. लाइक नंबर 1, द क्वेश्चन द सोशल हायरार्की. आई होप ऑल ऑफ यू नो दैट इन द फ्रांस सोसाइटी वाज डिवाइडेड इनटू 3 एस्टेट्स. 3 पार्ट में डिवाइड कर देते. द फर्स्ट एस्टेट वाज द क्लर्जी, द सेकंड एस्टेट वाज अरिस्टोक्रेसी एंड द थर्ड एस्टेट इंक्लूडेड एवरीवन एल्स. So if you wish, you can draw this diagram also, ki how this societal structure was now going to become defunct. This social structure was now being challenged by the principle of equality. And exactly this is what is going to happen in the French Revolution. They would ask for joint sitting. In fact, concept of joint sitting का मतलब क्या है? The third estate asked for joint sitting because they were a believer in the idea of equality, that we will not sit separate from all of you. Just because you consider yourself to be privileged does not mean you have the privilege now. And that's why when the privilege came into the question, the next thing which now came was the focus on equality. So if you wish, ऐसे कुछ diagrams आप बना सकते हैं. These are those diagrams which are very easy to be utilized anywhere else. जब भी क्वेश्चन इक्वालिटी का है, सेग्रीगेशन का है, सोशल स्ट्रक्चर का है, एंड यहाँ पे लिख दीजिए एग्जाम्पल ऑफ फ्रेंच सोसाइटी. whenever you have to mention about ancient regime, इसको साथ में लिखिए. ठीक है, so this is how the ancient regime was working. The French society based upon system of privileges divided into 3 tiers: clergy, aristocracy and the third estate, and it was entirely against the concept of equality. This system of privileges was getting affected by this new ideal of equality, which will become very profound in the revolution of 1789. तो जो हम जो डायग्राम देख रहे थे तो उसमें वही है, इट क्वेश्चन सोशल हायरार्की, अटैक्ड चर्च अथॉरिटी, अंडरमाइन किसको किया, एब्सोल्यूटिज्म, पॉपुलराइज द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मॉडल्स. इसकी वजह से क्या होगा, अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन के टाइम पे दे विल सी, दे विल नॉट बिलीव इन द इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ मोनार्की, दे विल क्रिएट रिपब्लिक. And finally, it also strengthened the claims of the middle class. This is exactly how the order, the social and the political order was attacked. In fact, क्यों हम चर्च वाला पॉइंट भी यहाँ पे ऐड कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज चर्च वॉज ऑल्सो रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द मेंटेनेंस ऑफ दिस सोशल ऑर्डर. दो ही पावर थे, ठीक है. इनफैक्ट ये आपका PYQ है एक. These were the two pillars. The system of privileges continued in France, or for that matter in any other country, because of the coalition which was there between the church and the absolute monarchy. Since there was coalition between these two, that's why the polity and the church were responsible for this. Who gave the privilege to aristocrats? It was the monarchy. Who created this artificial structure in which the clergy would be higher above everyone else? It was the church. And both these pillars are going to suffer during the French Revolution. The king, he would be stripped off of his absolute powers, while the church eventually would be taken down by the constitution of the clergy of 1790. तो इससे आई होप आपको समझ में आ रही, क्लैरिटी निकल के आ रही होगी कि हाँ किस तरीके से जो आइडियाज़ डेवलप हुए थे ड्यूरिंग द 18th सेंचुरी, दे अंडरमाइन द सोशल एंड द पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर. बट दैट डज नॉट मीन चेंजेस हर जगह एक साथ हुए. ठीक है, वो हम अगले पार्ट में लिखेंगे, बट अभी के लिए ये चीज़ समझ लीजिए. ठीक है, जो आपको एक ग्राफिक्स दिए जा रहे हैं, आप चाहो तो इनको यूटिलाइज करके अपनी एक नोटबुक बना लीजिए. ठीक है, उस नोटबुक का फ़ायदा क्या होगा, एग्ज़ाम से पहले आप रिवाइज कर पाएंगे और फिर उसको इम्प्लीमेंट कर पाएंगे. एंड प्लीज़ लिमिटेड अमाउंट ऑफ टाइम के अंदर ये डायग्राम्स वगैरह बनाना सीखना. अनलिमिटेड टाइम किसी के पास नहीं है. फॉर 10 मार्कर मैक्सिमम 8 मिनट्स, फॉर 20 मार्कर बिकॉज इन पेपर 2 जो हमारा वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री और मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री को मिला के आता है, या तो 10 मार्कर आएगा या 20 मार्कर आएगा. 20 मार्कर मीन्स 12.5 मिनट्स रफली. सो ये दो आप टाइम याद रखिएगा, 8 मिनट्स एंड रफली 12.5 मिनट्स. नाउ सेकेंड पार्ट में, हाउ इट वॉज अ चैलेंज टू चर्च अथॉरिटी एंड रिलीजियस डॉगमा. आप चाहें तो इस पॉइंट को अवॉइड भी कर सकते हैं और थोड़ा सा कम लिख सकते हैं. ठीक है, क्यों, बिकॉज इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर ज़्यादा फोकस किसके ऊपर है, ओल्ड रेजिम सोसाइटी एंड पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर. ठीक है, बट जब भी हम बात करेंगे सोसाइटल ऑर्डर, वो बिना चर्च तो बनने वाला है नहीं. जैसे अगर आप एक जस्ट एग्जांपल के लिए देखिए, इफ़ यू टॉक अबाउट इंडियन सोसाइटी, इज इंडियन सोसाइटी इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफ रिलीजन? नो. द होल वर्ना सिस्टम, कास्ट सिस्टम, हु गेव द सैंक्शन, किसने क्रिएट किया, ये रिलीजन ने क्रिएट किया. फिर सोसाइटी उसको अपने हिसाब से चेंज करती रहती है डिपेंडिंग अपॉन हाउ मच रिफॉर्म्स हैव बीन डन इन द रिलीजन. सो व्हेनेवर समबडी टॉक्स अबाउट सोसाइटी, religion is going to become important because the societal order, the stratification of any society depends upon the religion. वो चाहे कहीं की भी हो, यहाँ पर भी यही हुआ. इसलिए फर्स्ट क्लर्जी जो क्लर्जी हैं, दे बिकेम पार्ट ऑफ द फर्स्ट एस्टेट. इसी में वोल्टेयर एक बहुत अच्छा वर्ड यूज़ करते हैं, ठीक है, जिसको आप चाहे तो रट लीजिए. ठीक है, बट फ्रेंच कीवर्ड है. तो इट इज़ नोन एज एक्रासेज लिनफेमे, मीन्स गिव अप एवरीथिंग विच इज़ नॉट यूजफुल. In fact, Voltaire used to say that church is a den of superstitions and church is responsible for keeping those things, है ना, which जो scientific revolution है उसको अपनाने में रोक कौन रहा है, चर्च रोक रहा है. Church is not allowing modernization because it was helping church in maintaining its dominance. So this is exactly what we see in this case. ठीक है, तो इस चीज़ को ध्यान रखेंगे that church control education as well as social behavior, and that's why many thinkers like Voltaire came out and criticized it. In fact, encyclopedia also criticized the explanations. Like all of you know, the church used to believe that कि पूरा का पूरा जो सोलर सिस्टम है, अर्थ इज इट्स सेंटर, विच इज नोन एज जियोसेंट्रिक मॉडल. वहीं Copernicus, he came out with the new system, it was heliocentric. and he criticized the previous models which were accepted by the church, but church was not easy to let it go. So that's why there was a big fight going on church on one side, science on the other side, and this was recognized by many philosophers, that that's why the church was intolerant, the church was corrupt, and it was required to be changed over a period of time as per the requirement. And as all of us can understand, already there was a fight between the Catholics and the Protestants. The Protestants were rising from the 16th century onwards, and that's why among the Protestant, to a certain extent, there was a change. But among the Catholics, like France was a society which was a Catholic society, among the Catholics this problem was on the higher side. Among the Protestant, this religious corruption was less, because of its very nature, Protestant religion rose in the 16th century. Okay, so please remember these ideas. Then we can talk about how the Enlightenment thinkers also attacked the old regime political order. Like all of us understand Montesquieu, उन्होंने कौन सा book लिखा था? The Spirit of the Laws. Look, in your answer writing, it's always better if you mention the specific book of the person. तो यहाँ पे अगर आप लिखेंगे, एक तरीका सिर्फ ये लिखने का, Montesquieu gave the principle of separation of power. That is one way. Someone else is writing, Montesquieu in his book The Spirit of Laws argued that the state power has to be divided among legislature, executive and judicial branches. So explanation थोड़ा सा अच्छा निकल के आता है. And he also questioned the divine rights theory. Same comes from Voltaire, okay, who such as Letters on England to show कि constitutional methods were supreme in comparison to France. कि जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की है इंग्लैंड की, इट्स अ लॉट बेटर देन एब्सोल्यूट मोनार्की ऑफ फ्रांस. तो वो हमें वहाँ पे देखने को मिलता है. रूसो, द फेमस थियोरी ऑफ सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, in which he say that community and the state, they are having a social contract. Community is always looking for better governance from the state, but if the state is not able to fulfill its responsibility, then the community is always having the power to change them. तो ये जो चीज़ है हमें यहाँ पे रूसो के आइडियाज़ में देखने मिलती है. इनफैक्ट एरिक हॉब्सबॉम, जो कि एक फेमस मार्क्सिस्ट हिस्टोरियन है, ही सेज that these revolutionaries, these thinkers gave new vocabulary of political rights. जहाँ पहले डिवाइन ओरिजिन में बिलीव किया जाता था, अब हम बात करने लगे सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट की. जहाँ पहले एब्सोल्यूटिज्म में बात किया जाता था, नाउ वी टॉक्ड अबाउट सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर. So this new vocabulary of political rights which the old regime could not accommodate. In fact, even the enlightened despots, है ना, एनलाइटेंड डेस्पोट्स, आई होप आप सब लोगों ने पढ़ा होगा, है ना, जिनमें हम तीन मेजर लोगों का बात करते हैं, कैथरीन द ग्रेट, फ्रेडरिक द ग्रेट, जोसेफ सेकंड. दीज पर्सनालिटीज, they were also not political reformers. They went for social reforms, they went for economic reform, they even went for the religious reforms. But the enlightened despots never went for the political reforms. In fact, Catherine the Great, she utilized her reforms in order to put more control over her empire. So that's why the political system was bound to be affected by these ideas of enlightenment, which these people at any cost could not handle. Alright, so इसी वजह से हम कहते हैं, like there was a writer by the name of Tocqueville, he argued that monarchy unintentionally strengthened these social groups economically but kept them politically powerless, है ना. तो बहुत सारे जो पार्ट थे थर्ड एस्टेट्स के, मर्चेंट्स, लॉयर, प्रोफेशनल एक्सेट्रा, दे वांटेड ग्रेटर पॉलिटिकल रोल, बट दिस वाज नॉट हैपनिंग. They were economically very strong. They used to give even loans to the state, but they were never having the political power. This contradiction played a very important role in the rise of the middle class, and that changed everything. Because once the middle class became strong, they wanted social reforms, they also wanted political reforms, because economically they became the overweight. And that's exactly what we see in 1788 when France was on the verge of bankruptcy. This was the time that they led the whole process. And once the middle class won, they became responsible for ending privileges, which led to decline of aristocrats in France. They became responsible for even ensuring the rights were to be given to everyone. So Declaration of Rights also came in August 1789. So this is exactly what we need to remember. अब इसमें क्वेश्चन कहता है क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन. तो हमें इसमें एक चीज़ का ध्यान रखना है, ठीक है, एक चीज़ का ध्यान रखना है कि yes, it was unsettling. Yes, it was unsettling for the old order. But did it lead to immediate change in every country? No. In some countries like America and France, changes did happen in the 18th century, but in majority of the countries of the Europe, like Austria, Germany, Italy, etc., in all these countries, the ideas of the Enlightenment could not produce an immediate result. So this political and social order, it got unsettled, but it could not be questioned to the limit that there can be immediate change. So that did not happen in Europe immediately. It required some more time before such kind of changes could be implemented on the ground. And that's why Immanuel Kant says Voltaire was living in the age of enlightenment, but the age itself was not enlightened. That could be one of the conclusion which you can write here. Okay, that could be one of the conclusion. In fact, Eric Hobsbawm का एक quote भी use कर सकते हो that enlightenment turned political rebellion into a coherent ideological project. तो ideological challenge यहाँ से start हो गया था, but it required some more time. है ना, जैसे कि मैंने अभी आपको समझाया, there was some limitation of this age of enlightenment or these ideas. Ideas cannot be implemented on their own. They require some setup, और वो setup change होने में time लगा. ठीक है, like Derek Beals has said that enlightened despotism attempted to use reason to strengthen, not weaken royal authority. और ये चीज़ हम पहले देख चुके हैं, हमने डिस्कस भी कर लिया इसके बारे में. ठीक है, सो एनलाइटनमेंट ने क्या किया? ठीक है, दे प्रोवाइडेड द इंटेलेक्चुअल वेपन, बट मटेरियल क्राइसिस डिलीवर्ड द ब्लो. जब तक इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस नहीं हुआ फ्रांस के अंदर, तब तक कोई आइडियोलॉजिकल जो आइडियाज़ थे, जो आइडियोलॉजिकल वॉरफेयर था, उससे कुछ रिजल्ट निकल नहीं रहा था. जैसे ही इकोनॉमिक ऑर्डर फेल डाउन किया, पॉलिटिकल ऑर्डर उसके साथ डिक्लाइन कर गया बिकॉज ऑफ किंग लुइस 16 एंड हिज लैक ऑफ पावर टू हैंडल द क्राइसिस, एंड दैट बिकेम रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द सोसाइटल चेंज, पॉलिटिकल चेंज, एंड in fact creation of a new France. That's why we often say the old regime only died once the system of privileges was brought down on 4th of August 1789. So this is the linkage. ठीक है, इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर एक हिडन जो चीज़ है वो क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन के बारे में है कि भाई क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन मीन्स इन डेप्थ एनालिसिस, एंड व्हेन वी से इन डेप्थ एनालिसिस इट मीन्स we have to bring in all elements which are linked to this. Now please think about this question one more time. Okay, I hope by now it is clear to all of you. The ideas raised by enlightenment thinkers were profoundly unsettling and challenging to the old regime society and political order. Critically examine. So these are some of the way which you can improve your answer writing. तो इस पूरे जो मॉडल आंसर हमने आप लोगों को दिया है, इसके अंदर अच्छी खासी आंसर राइटिंग के लिए आपको कंटेंट भी मिल गया, हिस्टोरियंस भी मिल गए जिनको आप एनलाइटनमेंट के ऊपर यूज़ कर सकते हो, है ना. जैसे हमने 2-3 हिस्टोरियन का नाम याद करा दिया आपको. डेरेक बील्स का नाम याद कर सकते हो, एरिक हॉब्सबॉम का नाम याद कर सकते हो, टॉकवील का नाम आप चाहो तो याद कर सकते हो. ठीक है, एंड इवन इनिशियली वी टॉक्ड अबाउट विलियम डॉयल. सो 4 से 5 हिस्टोरियन हमने आपको दे दिए इसी क्वेश्चन के अंदर इंटीग्रेट करके. इससे ज़्यादा रिक्वायरमेंट आपको कभी नहीं पड़ेगी एनलाइटनमेंट एज अ टॉपिक के ऊपर. प्लस मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंटली, जब भी मौका मिले, यूज़ द आइडियाज़ ऑफ द कॉन्टेम्पररी पर्सनैलिटीज़. लाइक you can use the idea of Immanuel Kant, you can use the ideas of Voltaire to also state the first hand source कि what Immanuel Kant said about Voltaire. That's a very good way of doing introduction or conclusion. वहाँ पे आप चाहो तो हिस्टोरियोग्राफी को बैक स्टेज पे लेके आ सकते हो, इनको फॉरवर्ड लेके आ सकते हो, वहाँ पे कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. इनफैक्ट इट इज़ वेरी वेरी गुड वे ऑफ शोइंग कि आपको सिर्फ समझ ही नहीं आता, आपको इम्प्लीमेंट करना भी आता है. तो दिस इज़ द वे यू शुड थिंक अबाउट राइटिंग एन आंसर. जब आप आंसर राइट करने जाओगे तो आपको 3-4 चीज़ें चाहिए होंगी. एक इंट्रोडक्शन लिखने के लिए नैक क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा, थोड़ी सी हिस्टोरियोग्राफी. ओके, साइड बाय साइड वी हैव टू क्रिएट अ गुड बॉडी स्ट्रक्चर. वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द कीवर्ड कि सिंस इट इज़ क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन, तो इसमें हम क्या क्या चीज़ें और कर सकते हैं. एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली आपको एक अच्छा स्ट्रक्चर बना के कंक्लूजन तक जाना पड़ेगा. लाइक इन दिस क्वेश्चन वन गुड कंक्लूजन कुड बी कि आप इमैनुअल कांत की स्टेटमेंट लिख दीजिए, नहीं तो आप चाहें तो ये वाला कंक्लूजन भी लिख सकते हैं. ठीक है, like what is the significance of this? One significance of this conclusion that enlightenment ideas unsettled the old regime because they replaced inherited privilege with reason, divine rights monarchy with constitutionalism, and clerical authority with secular knowledge, meaning each and every part of the old regime was countered by an idea of the new world. Enlightenment thought was one of the most powerful forces that challenged and finally undermined the old political and social order और इसी के कंटिन्यूएशन में अगर आप लिखना चाहिए, एंड इन केस ऑफ यूरोप इट वाज फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, in case of America it was the American Revolution, who were responsible for bringing down the old regime, and among both these two French Revolution is more important from that perspective. हमारे बहुत फेमस राइटर हैं एलन मुखर्जी, ओके, एलन मुखर्जी उनका नाम है, वो अपनी बुक उन्होंने बहुत सारी लिखी है वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री के ऊपर। सो एलन मुखर्जी का भी आप ना पर्सपेक्टिव याद रखिए, हमेशा याद आपके काम आएगा, स्पेसिफिकली ऑन दिस टॉपिक। एलन मुखर्जी सेज दैट एनलाइटेंड despotism, which means the rulers like Catherine the Great, Frederick the Great, etc. Enlightened despotism could not solve the questions of the day, and it required the shock of French Revolution to build a new Europe, which eventually created fresh social and political order. Now, if you see, just by remembering few ideas, now you have good enough focus on introduction, okay, good enough for the structuring part and good enough for the conclusion. किसी को भी कहीं पे भी यूटिलाइज करो, ओके, किसी को भी कहीं पर भी यूटिलाइज करो, ऑलराइट। यस उदय, लेट मी हेल्प यू आउट विद दैट, ठीक है। तो अब इस क्वेश्चन को समराइज करते हैं, पूरे क्वेश्चन को एक बार फिर से पढ़ लेते हैं, देन लेट अस समराइज कि हमने जो भी डिस्कशन किया है उसमें से विच आर द थिंग्स, विच आर द की टेक अवेज, आपको याद क्या रखना है। So question says the ideas raised by Enlightenment thinkers were profoundly unsettling and challenging to the old regime society and political order critically examined. Okay, so this is the question that we have. Let us now create a final structure कि इसमें क्या structure हम लोगों को करना है। In the introduction we have learned that we can write about the age of reason or the age of enlightenment, which produced new ideas, which gave incentive for scientific thinking and unsettled both society as well as polity. ठीक है, if you wish you can add the idea of Eric Hobsbawm, who says that Enlightenment ideas created the ideological base for challenging the ancient regime. So these are the keywords which will come out of this. Established order, old order means ancient regime. Enlightenment can be linked directly with ideological base, which was based upon their ideas. So this is the introduction, enough. This can create an introduction for even a 10 marker or even a 15 marker. You will not face a challenge. Then second part, you have to mention about what were the new ideas coming, the right authors, how they challenge the social order, how they challenge the political order. This is going to be your body structure. Okay? In this body structure, you have to mention the ideas on which the society and the polity were based upon. Like society was based upon system of privileges. Political ideas, if we see, it was absolute authority, lack of separation of power, no rule of law, and lack of constitutionalism. All those things were questioned by the New Age ideas. Okay, New Age ideas. As a counter to this, you can mention that these ideas were unsettling, but they could not be brought to practice on their own. Because majority of the people, they were still illiterate, they could not drive the change, and that's why it required revolutions to do the same. Or you can mention the quotation of Immanuel Kant that Voltaire was living in the age of enlightenment, but the age itself was not enlightened. Okay, and finally in the conclusion you can conclude with the statement of Mr. Alan Mukherjee, who says that enlightened despots who were trying to implement these ideas of enlightenment half-heartedly could not solve the questions of Europe, and it required what? It required the shock of French Revolution to uproot the social and political order and create a new society which was based upon the modern principles. So that's what you can do in the conclusion. I hope the first question is clear to all of you. I'm trying to give you as much depth as possible to understand a question, to think about it, how to utilize information, and then finally how to craft the answer. This is the main objective of this whole program, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I hope all of you who are live, you can just give me a feedback that you're able to understand this. Okay, anyhow you're going to have this PPT. We are going to upload these class notes also, whatever I'm writing on the board. We will give you class notes of this also. So we'll upload this by tomorrow morning. So you can have these class notes also side by side. I hope this is now clear to everyone. The question number 1. All right. I would like to have more participation. By tomorrow, the whatever problem with the portal today would be solved, and we can have more interactive sections. ना? तो interactive sessions रहेंगे तो और अच्छे से आप लोग सब लोग सीख पाएंगे. Alright, so Uday, I hope it is clear. The rest, all of you who are live right now, you can just leave a comment so that I can also understand that the things are going fine. Okay, the things are going fine with all of you, because we have roughly taken half an hour. Okay, we have roughly taken 25 minutes to understand this question and bring in the depth. Okay, and do not waste your time. Do not waste your time. Okay, by running after historiography. If you see this question, we have mentioned at least 4 to 5 historian in one question itself. That's more than enough. That's enough for writing any answer of world history of enlightenment. Do not go for anything else. Okay, so try to reduce the content you're going for. Whatever notes you're having, if you're having your foundation notes, integrate that there itself. Okay, so this is the first question from the first topic, enlightenment. Now, these are the two questions which are very close to this. Okay, these are the two questions which are very close to this, which you can utilize. Okay, which you can utilize for writing your own answer. So we have given these suggestive questions, like see question number 1. Enlightenment was not confined to the scientific revolution alone. Humanism and ideas of progress were its inseparable constituents. Examine. Okay, so this is one question which we have. The second question is, the principles of enlightenment were in some ways a continuation of the discoveries and theories of the scientific revolution. Critically examine. So both these questions which UPSC has asked, they have linked enlightenment with scientific revolution. Okay, with scientific revolution. So in both these questions, what you need to do, first you have to link that how the Europe was changing. So let me just give you a brief idea so that if you write these answers from previous year questions, you can write very well. So what was happening in Europe? The first major event which started in the Europe was Renaissance. It started from Italy from late 13th century, but it reached its peak only by 14th and 15th century. And Renaissance was about revival of two prominent cultures. One was the culture of the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, and second of the Romans. When they tried to revive these cultures, it led to promotion of multiple things, and one of them was the focus on science. With the period of time, we see the rise of what is today known as scientific revolution. Scientific revolution means that the world which was previously explained only by the church on the basis of its own ideas or the dogmas was now questioned, and the scientists started explaining all the physical phenomena on the basis of rational principles. On the basis of rational principles. So what were those rational principles which we see during the scientific revolution? Like number one, the focus was now on observation. Focus was now on deduction. Focus now on creating theories which could be proved. The focus on practical aspects of science. We saw the rise of many personalities during this time, like Copernicus. He gave the heliocentric model of solar system, that sun is the center, not the earth. Similarly, Francis Bacon, he is considered one of the most profound personality, okay, with respect to science. He focused on deduction, that do not assume anything, okay, try to come up with deductions on the basis of the what is happening in front of you. Newton was probably one of the most important personality. He became responsible for identifying the discovery of gravity, and then he also became responsible for systematizing the principles of mathematics. We had Kepler, we had Galileo. Galileo created telescope. Kepler, he came out with laws for the planetary motions. Okay, so when somebody says that enlightenment was a continuation of the scientific principles, so these were the scientific principles which were there, okay. Because of these principles, what happened, actually there was rise of scientific thinking, and most importantly, these principles were now applied in the field of political, social, economic, and even religious fields. Okay, even religious fields. Like in politics, absolute monarchy was not good enough for a society. The focus was on separation of power, constitutionalism, rule of law. So because of applying the scientific approach of critical analysis, we found that politics was better off with these principles. Society privileges were questioned. Focus was on equality, freedom of speech and expression, like the famous saying of Voltaire that I may not agree with you, but I will fight till death your right to say it. In economics, we find principles like laissez-faire. Adam Smith became responsible for focus on free market economics because he realized with analysis that the control of the state or mercantilism as a system was unsustainable. Religious, the focus was now on secularism. State should be largely free from the control of church, and they should also follow a scientific approach. So these two questions, they largely come from this specific area. Okay, so I have given you these two questions. Please write at least one of them. That will improve your way of writing answers. Okay, that's why I'm explaining the major theme. The introduction could be as easy as that scientific revolution defined the history of Europe during 16th and 17th centuries, where scientists like Copernicus, Newton, Kepler, etc. rose and challenged the traditional notions. What were the principles of science? Observation, deduction, theorization, practical aspects of it, critical analysis, evidence-based focus. Okay, evidence becomes very important. So these became the scientific principles, and finally these scientific principles, when they were applied to different fields of life of humanity, they helped in the creation of the age of enlightenment. And all these ideas belong to one or the another philosopher. So these philosophers of 18th century, they were applying the ideas of science in different fields. It could be polity, economy, society, religion. And that's why the Enlightenment was a continuation of the ideas of scientific revolution. Plus, Enlightenment side by side also had a lot of focus on humanity. So whichever institution was against the progress of humanity, that was now to be discarded, that was now to be changed. So that also became one of the important principles. So along with scientific revolution, focus was on humanity, focus was on progress. And that also came along with it. And that's why these ideas could be seen erupting later on. Okay, so it is my humble request to all of you that please try to write any one of these questions, and I have given you the gist of both of them. Okay, use the introduction which we have used in this question itself, try to think of a conclusion, try to think of the utilization of the body structure. The historiography is already given here. Okay, historiography is already given here, don't go beyond it. Okay, historiography is good enough. So this is going to help you out in your preparation process, and answer writing can be easily solved if you try to go for the scientific method. Okay, तो ये जो approach हम follow कर रहे हैं, it's going to be very very useful for all of us. All right, if it is fine, let us go to the next topic. I hope this is fine with everyone. Everybody is able to understand. Okay, everybody is able to understand. Okay, so let us now go with the second topic. The second topic is about rise of socialist ideas and spread of Marxian socialism. ठीक है, so इस टॉपिक को whenever you prepare, दो पार्ट में आपको डिवाइड करना है. ठीक है, this topic number 2, so we have to divide it into two parts. First about pre-Marx ideas, and second Marxism itself. This part is relatively straightforward. Try to understand about the various socialists from England, France, Switzerland, etc. Like from England, we had Robert Owen. From France, there are multiple personalities from France. Okay, the most famous being Louis Blanc. Okay, we also had Proudhon. All of them, they were from France, Switzerland, Charles Leonard. So all of these people, they were from different countries, trying to focus on the initial socialism. This initial socialism was largely trying to work within the capitalistic structure of society. Okay, but all of this was challenged by Marxism. So if you see the ideas of Karl Marx, the two famous texts that we have, one is Communist Manifesto of 1848, and then we have the 3 volumes of Das Kapital. They help us in understanding the ideas of Karl Marx, or which eventually would become Marxism. So we have chosen one question specifically from the second part, Marxism, because it is often more challenging than the first part. The first part is very simple, and if you have my notes, if you have done foundation, or even if you have done Kranti in the past, or you're doing crash course with us, we will be covering this topic, so no challenge would be there. Let us now take one question from here. So please see this question. Marxism was not just a critique of capitalism, but a theory of historical motion. Okay, the question says it was not just a critique of capitalism, but a theory of historical motion, meaning how the history has been shaped by the ideas put forward by Karl Marx. Examine the philosophical foundations of Marxism with reference to historical materialism, dialectics, and class struggle. So, in this question, we have to evaluate the ideas of Karl Marx. Okay, we have to evaluate his ideas. So, you should have some understanding of these ideas, and then eventually we can utilize them for the sake of making the answer. Now, again, we come to the same kind of structure. How to write a good introduction for this? So, please take 1 minute and see the question is on the board, even though the introduction is also written, but don't look at it. First, try to think what would you write in the introduction. Okay, so the question says Marxism was not just a critique of capitalism but a theory of historical motion. Examine the philosophical foundation of Marxism with reference to historical materialism, dialectics, and class struggle. So please think about it. I'm giving 1 minute to all of you. What could be the possible level of introduction here? Just think. Okay, what could be way? Like, one introduction is there in front of you, but this may not be the perfect one. Okay, and every time we cannot write the perfect one, but side by side I can give you this advice that whatever introduction that we have written, like for the enlightened despotism specifically, or Marxism, you can make them a notebook और उसके अंदर उसको लिख लीजिए. It will be very very helpful. उसको बार बार यूटिलाइज करिए, बहुत अच्छा लगेगा आपको उसको यूटिलाइज करने में. ठीक है, तो आपके इंट्रोडक्शंस की जो दिक्कत है उसको आप सॉल्व कर सकते हो. So think like what could be the process? The process could be as easy as highlighting from where do we get the ideas of Marxism. जैसे कि अभी हमने देखा, आप सीधा लिख सकते हो इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर that the Karl Marx ideas. Okay, naturally if you wish you can mention the name of Frederick Engels also, because Karl Marx did not do everything on his own. He was helped by Frederick Engels. Okay, so here you can mention that the ideas of Karl Marx along with that of Frederick Engels could be easily understood by reading their work, that is Communist Manifesto, as well as 3 volumes of Das Kapital. In these works, they have highlighted the major principles of Marxism. That could be one way of writing an introduction, an easy way, not difficult at all. If you can bring some more analytical approach, like analytical approach is from where did Karl Marx created his idea of Marxism. So if you know that much, that can bring in the analytical approach. So how would you utilize that? Like it is here, by combining German idealist philosophy. He took the ideas of Hegel. Hegel was a German idealist philosopher. His ideas were taken by him. So from there he took the idealist philosophy. He also combined the British political economy, meaning what would be the role of state. And finally, he also used the French revolutionary thought. Like the idea of communism was discussed by many French philosophers even before Karl Marx. Okay, even though it was not given a definite shape, that shape was provided by Karl Marx. So he took the ideas from 3 specific directions, from the Germans, okay, his own, because he himself belonged to Germany, second from Britain, and third from France. And on the basis of this, he was able to create a theory which was going to change the world in the coming times. So this is the broader way, okay, this is the broader way of thinking about it. Okay, this is the broader way of thinking about it, that if you have that much of analytical way of thinking, then you can use this kind of introduction also. Like today we are discussing about it. Whenever you write an exam in the any exam, in test series or in the mains examination, you can use this approach. This can also be an approach of writing an analytical introduction, but that would require that you should know about it. Okay, without knowing about it, you cannot write this kind of introduction. What we discussed initially, that largely we are just writing from where did we can find his ideas. That's a very basic level approach. This is an advanced level approach. Okay, so in this introduction, what we have done, initially we have mentioned that Marxism was not just linked to Karl Marx, it was also linked to the another philosopher, okay, another scholar, Friedrich Engels, which was more than a denunciation of capitalism or more than just a criticism. So often you can use a synonym, like for criticism you can use the keyword denunciation, okay, of capitalism's exploitative nature. It offered a comprehensive theory of historical development, identifying material conditions and class conflict as the primary forces driving human history, okay, which he would explain also, okay, which he would explain also later on, that how the history has been influenced by it, by the idea of class struggle. So in this question, basic level introduction would be as easy as just writing from where do we get the ideas of Karl Marx. Detailed, better level introduction, analytical level introduction would require where you summarize that the ideas of Karl Marx can be linked with three major schools of thought. From Germany, it was Hegel. From British, it was the role of state. And from the French, it was the broader idea of communism. So when we combine all these three, we are able to understand about Marxism in a better manner. Even there is a PYQ, okay, that the ideas of Marxism were largely linked to German Hegelism and French socialism. So that idea is also there in the PYQ. So if you can remember the PYQ and their exact statement, that can be a very good introduction, giving you this hint. Okay, so if you want to understand the principles of doing better level of introduction, just remember the quotations of PYQs. They themselves are so beautiful, and when you write them, it looks like a poet is writing history. And whenever somebody gets a little bit of delight in what you have written, तो वो आपको marks अच्छा देंगे, है ना. देखो, as a human, all of us are emotional. Even if we say that we are very rational in taking decisions, each and every one of us is emotional. And when we see a certain level of stage is set in the introduction itself, you will get more marks. So try to improve your introduction by taking the cue from the discussion of today. Okay, so this is how you can improve your introduction. जैसे कि अगर हम analysis के अंदर जाएं introduction के, ठीक है, तो एनालिटिकल के लिए आपको स्पेसिफिकली पता होना चाहिए कि भाई क्या क्या एरियाज हैं विच कैन बी लिंक्ड विद दिस. कंटेक्स्ट बहुत क्लियर है कि इनकी जो पूरी फिलॉसफी है, इट इज डेवलप्ड बाय कार्ल मार्क्स अलॉन्ग विद द हेल्प फ्रॉम फ्रेडरिक एंजल्स. ओके, फोकस थीसिस के लिए अगर आप चाहें तो भाई यू कैन लिंक टुवर्ड्स व्हाट वर द मेजर आइडियाज ऑफ क्लास कन्फ्लिक्ट, हिस्टोरिकल चेंज, सोसाइटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, उनके बारे में आप मेंशन कर सकते हो. एंड इसके बाद आपको ट्रांजिशन करने के लिए नेक्स्ट लेवल पे सीधा सीधा आइडियाज़ को इंट्रोड्यूस करना है. दैट वुड बी दी नेक्स्ट स्टेज. ठीक है, तो किस टाइप का आप इंट्रोडक्शन करना चाहते हो उसको आप देख लीजिएगा और धीरे धीरे करके अपनी अप्रोच को क्लियर आउट करिए. ठीक है, सो आफ्टर इंट्रोडक्शन द नेक्स्ट थिंग विच वी कैन ईजिली आइडेंटिफाई फ्रॉम दिस क्वेश्चन, तीन मेजर सब हेडिंग्स बनेंगी: हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म, डायलेक्टिक्स एंड फाइनली इट वुड बी क्लास स्ट्रगल. तीन पार्ट में हम इसको डिवाइड करना है कि भाई एग्जामिन द फिलोसॉफिकल फाउंडेशंस ऑफ मार्क्सिज्म. ठीक है, तो पहले हम चाहें तो वी कैन टॉक अबाउट हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म. सो व्हाट इज दिस हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म? दिस आइडिया ऑफ हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म इज रिटन बाय हिम इन दिस प्रीफेस टू ए कंट्रीब्यूशन to the critique of political economy. In this he say, it is not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but the social existence that determines their consciousness. In other words, the economic structure, meaning how the amount of wealth you have, okay, is going to define the set of your ideas, and as well as the institutions such as religion, law and politics arise from and serve to justify this base. In a meaning, economy is the foundation of everything else. This is what he says in the basic ideas. This is what historical materialism is all about. Okay, this is what historical materialism is all about. So in this specific part, mention about it. Also tell us, also specifically mention what was the ideological superstructure. So he says that the mode of production which was there in the capitalist society, it was of ownership of means. If you control the means of production, you are always going to be more richer than the others. And this has been historically been the way, right? Before capitalism also, whoever was controlling the means was always in power. So this created a hierarchy, okay, over a period of time. And this divine rights, church, all of them, they reflected and reinforced this order. And he also said the relationship between the bourgeois and the proletariat, it was largely based upon this premise. In fact, E.H. Carr, he is one of the most famous Marxist historian. He says that historical materialism is the Marx's greatest contribution by placing human history within a materialistic framework that could analyze systematically. So ये इनका सबसे greatest contribution है. The society just not work upon ideas. It is largely going to function on its economy. जिस टाइप के डिवीजन होगी इकोनॉमिक रिसोर्सेज की, जिस टाइप की वेल्थ होगी लोगों के पास में, वही डिसाइड करेगी उनकी कोर्स ऑफ एक्शन, उनकी लाइफ एंड इवन द मेजर लेवल ऑफ चेंजेस विच विल बी सीन इन दैट सोसाइटी और द इंटरप्ले इन दैट सोसाइटी. दिस इज अबाउट हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म. ठीक है, तो इसको भी एक ग्राफ की तरह देख लेते हैं कि भाई सबसे पहले इट कम्स अप विद द कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव थ्योरी, जिसका पहला पार्ट क्या निकलेगा, हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म. सेकंड इज डायलेक्टिकल मटेरियलिज्म एंड थर्ड हाउ ही कंसिडर्स class struggle as the motor of history or as the responsible for the broader level of motion, and then state as the instrument of class rule. and कि भाई जब तक capitalist है ना and are going to be strong, वो तभी तक रहेंगे जब तक उनका रिलेशनशिप किसका रहेगा, स्टेट. दैट्स वाई ही वांटेड दैट प्रोलेटेरिएट शुड कैप्चर द स्टेट इटसेल्फ. देयर शुड बी ए कंप्लीट रेवोल्यूशन, अ वायलेंट रेवोल्यूशन. एंड फाइनली ही ऑलवेज से दैट कैपिटलिज्म वाज नॉट द फाइनल स्टेज ऑफ द सोसाइटी. Capitalism जो है it's a part of the transition, and finally the final stage of the society is going to be communism. That's what Karl Marx used to say. तो आप चाहें तो इस पूरे broader diagram को भी बना सकते हैं in your paper. Okay, coming back to the second part which is very close is dialectical method. देखिए the topic of dialectical ये इन्होंने सीखा था हेगल से. Hegel used to say that whenever we see evolution of ideas, तो सबसे पहले एक थीसिस आएगी, ठीक है, देन देयर इज गोइंग टू बी एन एंटीथीसिस, उसका काउंटर पार्ट आएगा, एंड देन बोथ ऑफ देम आर गोइंग टू मिक्स एंड देन विल सी सिंथेसिस. ठीक है, लाइक इनफैक्ट ही यूज्ड टू से दैट वी हैव सीन द एंट्री ऑफ capitalism as a theory. On the other hand, the solution which is shown by many of the previous writers is socialism, but it was not able to work, and that's why as per him the synthesis was going to be communism. Okay, so this was the idea of dialectical कि भाई whenever one force comes an anti-force also comes, and finally comes the harmony. This is what Karl Marx believed in. His ideas were very much linked to this phenomena. और ये इन्होंने कहाँ से borrow किया है? This was borrowed from Hegel. ठीक है, one of the philosopher of the German, वहाँ से इन्होंने इसको borrow किया. देखो in reality क्या हुआ ना, capitalism, communism और आज की डेट में democratic socialism has become the most favorite one. In fact, even if you see India as a whole, तो जो गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसीज हैं, they were more like democratic socialism. Like recently we have seen that कि जो न्यूयॉर्क के नए मेयर बने हैं, he has become very famous personality all over the globe. And why? Because he is now an active supporter of democratic socialism. So in the heart of capitalism, a democratic socialist has won. Why? Because the proletariat or the working class is so much suffering under the capitalistic structure that they want some change. And that's exactly what he's trying to offer. He's trying to bring in solutions for housing, solution for medical care, etc., etc. All those kinds of things are being asked. Okay, like here we have a historian, George Lukács. He says dialectics in Marxism is not a mere method, it's a form of motion of social reality itself. He says dialectics is what makes Marxism dynamic and predictive, not static like earlier economic theories. Okay, so largely this is what he says. Okay, but there is always going to be a fight between ideas, and finally there were going to be the victory of the synthesis. Class struggle. This is also a very, very important idea put forward by him.
What he says in class struggle is that during every age there has been a class struggle. During the ancient times there was a class struggle between the master and the slaves. During the medieval time it was the feudal lord versus the serf, and similarly during the modern age we are seeing a fight between the bourgeois and the proletariat. So this is how he says that throughout history there has been class wars, and if the proletariat can muster up the courage, if they can think about themselves as a broader class, they have nothing to lose but their chains. And this is how he justified that throughout history there has been a class struggle, and this is a historical opportunity for the working class to now take over everything from the outlived ideology of capitalism. So in the 19th century he was criticizing Adam Smith and his idea of free market economics, and he was now in favor of what is known as the class struggle. In fact, this idea we can find in Communist Manifesto. It says the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle, like in ancient, medieval, and even the modern we have seen a fight. So these are the ideas which he is trying to bring in. Okay, and he says class struggle is not merely economic, it is also political as well as ideological. Like he used to say that state in this model is not neutral but a committee for managing the common affairs of the bourgeois. There is always going to be a close relationship between the political class and the capitalist class. So when we say bourgeois versus the proletariat, it's not just about economic rights, it's also about the political and the social right, because the politics is also giving maximum incentive to the business class, to the business groups. So that's why he's saying it is not just economic. Don't be wrong in this, right? It's also about the others. So that's why he says it would require a violent struggle to fight against them. And that's why Eric Hobsbawm, who is one of the finest Marxist historians, he says his theory of class struggle gave modern revolution their scientific grounding, replacing moral outrage with analytical clarity. Why he's using these keywords, replacing moral outrage with analytical clarity? Try to understand its meaning. All the previous socialists, they were unhappy because of the way the capitalists were treating the working class. So there was a certain moral way of thinking about it, but they were not able to provide a system which could put a big challenge in front of them, which could make them determined, the working class, to fight as a unit. That's why when he talked about class struggle, he tried to give them clarity that unless you topple them, unless you take control of the state, you will not be able to bring down the capitalist class. That's why he gave two solutions very clearly. Number one, that go for the dictatorship of the proletariat. And number two, he gave the idea of abolition of private property. Abolition of private property would lead to the decline of capitalism as a whole. Dictatorship of the proletariat would ensure that nobody is taken to take away, or nobody is able to discount the interest of the working class. When we combine both of these, it eventually goes with the ideas of the class struggle, that the class struggle would come to an end only when there's only one class, and that is proletariat. Everybody become like an actor, nobody become like a worker. Nobody is going to become eventually the privileged class. Everybody is going to be the working class, and this is going to be managed by the state. So the idea of state here was to be that of an empire. It would ensure that everybody can live happily, and that's how the principle also emerged, from everybody as per their capacity to everybody as per their requirement, as per their need. This is how the society was required to function from now onwards. But naturally, as all of us can understand, Marxism gave a lot of these ideas, which is the main theme of this question, but in reality it could not function. In reality it could not function. Okay, why he considered Marxism as a theory of historical motion? तो इसके ऊपर भी थोड़ा सा एक आपको हल्का सा पैराग्राफ लिखना है, जो हमने फर्स्ट लाइन में दिया हुआ है ना, उसके ऊपर हल्का सा लिखना पड़ेगा. Why? Because he says that capitalism जो है वो in between phase है. There is a shift from mercantilism to capitalism, but it's not going to be the final one. The final one is going to be proletariat, and there's going to be creation of a classless society. So what he had said, that today we have capitalism, it will be eventually overthrown by the rise of communism. In the long run,
we'll see the creation of communes would be trying to create a stateless society. So capitalism was just a part of the motion. The logical end was still missing, and that's what was going to be the end as per Marxism. Even though nobody has been able to achieve this final end, communes have been created, but it could not be converted into creation of stateless society. Even Gandhiji believes in the concept of village republic or stateless society, but Gandhiji believes in class cooperation. Marxism believes in the class struggle. This was asked once in the prelims, है ना? Prelims में भी कभी-कभार ऐसे क्वेश्चन आ जाते हैं. So if you have clarity of these ideas, that becomes very useful in your prelims examination also, side by side. So this whole question which we have given to you, question number 2, it's very academic in nature, but UPSC have asked such questions very recently. And that's why, to bring in the clarity of ideas, to give you a specific set of content, we have asked you this question. In the conclusion, you can mention about that how this whole idea of Marxism which was given, it was based upon holistic understanding, okay, of the previous societies as well as the economic ideology which were in practice. He gave a framework which could create a broader level of social change which can change the society for the whole or for the future. And Perry Anderson says that Marxism gave history a logic, direction and a moral purpose, offering not merely a lens to interpret the world but a call to transform it. You can just remember this quote. This quote can be utilized in any Marxist question, है ना? उसके conclusion में आप इसको लिख सकते हो. This can become a good way of doing a conclusion. Alright, so in this question also, अगर हम broader level पे structuring करने की सोचें, तो आपको क्या पता होने चाहिए? You should know about the Marxist ideas, कि what is historical materialism, what is dialecticism, what is class struggle, and more importantly, who all had contributed to this, who all had contributed to this. ठीक है? So इस चीज़ के बारे में आपको थोड़ी सी जानकारी होनी चाहिए. This question is very academic in the sense that unless you understand these ideas, आप अच्छा आंसर नहीं लिख पाओगे. So इसके ऊपर थोड़ी सी clarity लेके आपको आनी पड़ेगी. Similar kind of questions we have seen asked by UPSC, थोड़े से आसपास में है, ठीक है? तो वो आप लिख सकते हो. Fred Engels did much more than Marx himself to popularize the ideas of Marxism, number 1. Number 2 question says, with the writings of Karl Marx, socialism assumed the form of scientific socialism. In question number 1, let me just help you out, okay, what you can write. So in question number 1, you have to specifically mention on the contribution of Friedrich Engels. And this contribution of Friedrich Engels could be seen on multiple levels. Like number 1, he was responsible for providing economic support to Karl Marx. The father of Friedrich Engels was a mill owner in England, and he was having enough resources to help Karl Marx to sustain himself. Otherwise, he would not have been able to formulate his ideas. Second, he also was very prominent with respect to formulating the ideas. He was a very important part of Communist Manifesto of 1848. He also was responsible for broadly editing all these 3 volumes of Das Kapital. And in fact, you need to remember this, that Friedrich Engels continued the process of promoting Marxism even after his death. Karl Marx had died in 1883, but Friedrich Engels, he continued for the next decade or so till he was alive, 1895, for promoting it. So he took this to the internationals where the socialists used to meet, and it is because of this, his effort, we see the rise of leaders like Lenin, who would transform the world by creating the first Marxist revolution, which is known as the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. That's the first question, okay? That's the first question. I've just done the process of brainstorming in front of you. You will understand the structuring part of it, and you can also explain what were those ideas of Marxism. So same these ideas which we have seen, उसको आपको थोड़ा सा elaborate करना पड़ेगा. What were the ideas? So वो आप यहाँ पे लिख दीजिएगा, ठीक है? Historical materialism, dialectical materialism. I mentioned about class struggle. There was also one more idea which is known as labor surplus value. What Karl Marx says, that whatever profit is generated, okay, throughout the year by any venture, maximum of that profit goes to the capitalist, even though maximum value is provided by the labor of the working class. That's why he says profit is nothing but it's the theft.
ये चोरी की गई है लेबर क्लास से, उसका हक नहीं दे के उसको कमेंसुरेट सैलरी नहीं दी जाती, वेजेस नहीं दी जाती. सो ही ऑल्सो केम आउट विद दिस आइडिया ऑफ लेबर सरप्लस वैल्यू. तो ये भी आप चाहो तो एक आइडिया यहाँ पे लिख सकते हो. लेबर सरप्लस थियरी कर सकते हो और लेबर सरप्लस वैल्यू जो अपना देते हैं, जिसका फ़ायदा मैक्सिमम कौन उठाता है, कैपिटलिस्ट उठाता है. तो मैक्सिमम आपको एक्सप्लेन करना है कि व्हाट वाज द रोल ऑफ एंजल्स इन प्रमोटिंग मार्क्स. ओके, एंड सेकंड व्हाट वर दोज आइडियाज ऑफ मार्क्सिज्म. तो थोड़ा सा पार्ट ये लिखना है, थोड़ा सा पार्ट वो लिखना है, मर्ज बोथ ऑफ देम. कंक्लूजन आपके पास हमने यहाँ पे दे दिया ऑलरेडी. हिस्टोरियोग्राफी आपको 2-3 मिल गई है, इट्स मोर देन इनफ. सेकेंड, with the writings of Karl Marx, socialism assumed the form of scientific socialism critically examined. Okay, so here we have to compare the pre-Marx socialism versus the socialism of Karl Marx. उसको हमने compare करना है. तो in this question, what exactly you need to do, you have to see what was the nature of pre-Marx. Okay, so pre-Marx, and then Marxism, how Marxism solved it. Like, if we see the pre-Marx, number one, the idea of socialism was given by large number of writers. This idea of socialism was not coherent at all. But when we see Karl Marx, this idea became coherent in Communist Manifesto as well as Das Kapital, the 3 volumes of this. Second, these people criticized the exploitation, but they were trying to change within the structure of capitalist society, which was not going to be useful, because unless capitalism itself was challenged, nothing was going to change. That's why he came out with the concept of abolition of private property, so that the foundation of the capitalist structure could rupture under its own weight. So capitalism, the capitalistic structure, was challenged by the Karl Marx by bringing in the abolition of private property. These people did not give any definitive role to the state. In fact, there was only one person, Louis Blanc, who talked about the role of state. But here, when we talk about Karl Marx, he said that state should be dominated by the proletariat. He also gave them incentive. They have nothing to lose but their chains. So he gave the idea of class struggle. That if you will not struggle, then you will not be able to change the history. The history is going to repeat itself. First as a tragedy and second as a farce, which is a famous comment of Karl Marx. Okay, they kept on believing in the concept of class cooperation, which was not going to function until and unless there was a major change of heart, like even Gandhiji used to believe in the concept of trusteeship. So the pre-Marxian socialism, we'll see people like Robert Owen, who believed in what? Robert Owen believed in the concept of creating these model societies which could function selflessly, but that did not work out. Okay, like New Harmony he created in America, it did not work out. So all these pre-Marxian socialist thinkers, they failed to create the impact which was required to change the state of affairs, and all these ideas were taken to its logical end by Marxism. So in this question, you have to do this comparison. Okay, you have to do this comparison. I hope this topic is now having a little bit of clarity for all of you. We have discussed this question, okay, which is a little bit academic, but nevertheless, it's a very important question. It can come very next year also. And Marxism was not just a critique of capitalism, but a theory of historical motion, and examine his philosophical foundation of historical materialism, dialectics, and class struggle. So this is the question that we have solved, and side by side, we have tried to also give the broader idea for these two PYQs also. So I hope you can learn from this, okay? So what we are doing, we are trying to multiply the outcome. है ना, क्वेश्चन एक सॉल्व कर रहे हैं बट उसके साथ में दो और सजेस्टिव क्वेश्चंस हैं। आप चाहें तो इसमें से कोई भी एक लिख के देख लीजिएगा, मैंने आपको डिस्कस कर दिया है। तो इससे फ़ायदा क्या होगा ना कि एक टॉपिक के ऊपर मल्टी डायमेंशनलिटी आपकी डेवलप हो जाएगी, एंड यू विल ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंड दैट वी कैन यूज द सेम इंट्रोडक्शन कंक्लूजन विद लिटिल बिट ऑफ change here and there for creating answers, and that's the one of the most important part of this. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Let us now go to the next topic. Okay, the next topic is about the rise of the modern world. In the rise of the modern world, we have 3-4 topics. The first topic that we have for today is American Revolution itself. The second topic is going to be French Revolution. I hope so far everything is clear. You are able to understand what I'm trying to convey. This is the broader structure which is to be followed by all of us. Okay, this is the broader structure which is to be followed by all of us, because this is going to create an outcome which is going to be very useful for all of us. Shall we continue? Right, this is now a previous year question which have been asked by UPSC in 2025 itself. This question, please see: the American Revolution was in many respects a manifestation of enlightenment in political, civil and ecclesiastical spheres. Ecclesiastical means religious spheres. Okay, a manifestation of enlightenment, meaning in a way here you have to mention a manifestation of enlightenment means implementation of ideas, that the American Revolution in a way implemented the ideas of enlightenment in political, civil and ecclesiastical, meaning religious spheres. Okay, so I think by now all of us would have understood what to write in this question. Very simple. Again, the question is linked to ideas of enlightenment. What could be our introduction? This topic is about American Revolution. So what could be the introduction? Okay, इट्स अ वेरी बेसिक लेवल टॉपिक, आप चाहें जैसे मर्जी इसको लिख सकते हैं। एक बहुत ही बेसिक लेवल इंट्रोडक्शन क्या होगा? अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन, इट वाज अ वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ 13 ब्रिटिश कॉलोनीज फ्रॉम 1775 to 1783, and this revolution was occasioned by the imposition of taxes by the British government, which led to the slogan of no taxation without representation. So in the introduction we can just mention the immediate circumstances leading for war, and we can define in one line what was this event American Revolution looked like. Okay, so that's one way of writing about it. So please see the introduction. American Revolution was a colonial revolt against British rule driven by issues of taxation without representation, economic restrictions and desire for self-governance. It resulted in the independence of 13 American colonies and the formation of United States of America, marking a turning point in modern history. Now, this whole introduction, what's the beauty of this introduction? This introduction is bringing in certain facts. This introduction is trying to also evaluate what were the causes of the revolution, and finally the significance is also written in one single line. Okay, this is a good way of doing introduction. All of you can think about it. Please take 1 minute and please think what could be other ways of writing an introduction for this question, and if you wish you can just suggest me in the comment box. So please think about it. Okay, this whole course is about learning how to be effective in the examination, in the process of answer writing. The process of answer writing depends upon lots of things, and we are just trying to master some of them. And slowly as we will go forward, as I've already told all of you that we are going to have around 16 classes. This is the first class, and the first class itself would have given you the idea. It's going to be very, very beneficial, and to make it more effective for all of us, we are trying to cover some of the similar questions side by side. Okay, that even though that I am doing a little bit quickly, but this process is going to be very, very useful. So try to learn brainstorming, try to learn how to take it forward. Please think. And please try to make a separate notebook for the introduction. Okay, even if it's not notebook, you can make you can keep these 2-3 pages. Okay, and as per topic you can write introductions there and just revise them again and again. This whole exam is about certainty. The exam is about perfect execution. It's not about learning new content daily on daily basis. That's not what this exam is all about. We are not going to do PhD on any topic. If you can see this question is very straightforward. But even if it is straightforward, very few people would have been able to write to the extent it was required. And why so? Because practice is often on the lesser side. That has been a problem of everyone. That problem is faced by everyone in this examination. So that's why we are required to be very professional in our approach, and that will create a better level of structure for all of us. Okay. So let us now see, okay, what could be the other possibilities of doing introduction. So other possibilities could be that we can define specifically what were the outlying areas which led to this revolution. So we can define like the intensification of conflict between the Americans and the British in the post 7 Years War prepared the background for the fighting of American War of Independence. Full stop. This War of Independence was influenced by the modern ideas of enlightenment rising in the Europe. So that could also be one way of writing an introduction. Good, Uday. You can also write that like spread of enlightenment through establishment of universities, newspapers, etc. became the guiding light behind the American Revolution, and they tried to implement these ideas just immediately after the revolution, right? So you can write facts, okay? थोड़ा और facts चाहते हो तो आप लिख सकते हो that the American Revolution was essentially a war of independence led by their military commander, and you can write about that, who was the military commander, who was the first president. All of you know about the facts, right? So वो आप चाहो तो वहाँ पे लिख सकते हो कि like how George Washington was responsible for this, and after 1783 the independence was recognized by signing Treaty of Paris, and it eventually led to constitutionalism, or it eventually led to creation of a constitution which led to the beginning of the new world moving in the democratic direction. That could also be a kind of introduction. So there could be n ways of doing an introduction. और आपको ये समझना है कि भाई with minimum friction how your brain can function. So try to create those kinds of things which can work and which can create fast results. हमें जल्दी रिजल्ट चाहिए होगा, एग्ज़ाम में हमेशा बहुत कम टाइम मिलेगा, उसी को हमने लेके चलना है, ठीक है? तो जैसे अगर हम इसका ब्रॉडर एक एनालिसिस करें तो एक आप एनालिटिकल वे में लिख सकते हो कि भाई द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द रिवोल्ट और द रेवोल्यूशन was the change in the relationship of the colonies because of the political and the economic hardship which they were facing. Second, you can just specifically mention about the time period and tell us जिसकी भाई क्या reasons थे इसके develop होने के लिए. Third, you can talk about the grievances which were piling up since 1760s and the lack of statesmanship in the Britain pushed the colonies towards a warfare or the revolution. And finally, you can just mention about that broadly किस तरीके से enlightenment के ideas ने एक development किया, and it just led to the creation of this. एक बहुत अच्छा previous year question है. That previous year question says that the Americans, it was an enlightened society from the beginning because the settlers, they came from Europe, so they were already aware of those ideas. So they say that American Revolution was one of the most expected event in the world history during the 18th century, as the people who settled in America were essentially from Europe, and when the British rule was based upon colonial principle, it led to the raising of the banner of revolt. तो वो भी आप चाहो तो यहाँ पे लिख सकते हो, ठीक है? So try to grasp as much as possible. And introduction is one area which is going to be the most challenging for the beginners. तो आप से जो भी suppose पहला main expectation लगा रहे हैं for the next year, or you have written this year, तो आपको improve करना पड़ेगा, or you have written you were not able to clear this year, so you have to improve yourself drastically. और थोड़ा थोड़ा उसमें हिस्टोरियोग्राफी का टच डालना है, बट ओवर आप ये समझ लीजिए एम्फेसिस नहीं करना है हिस्टोरियोग्राफी के ऊपर. पर टॉपिक एक दो हिस्टोरियन हैं, उनको बार बार यूटिलाइजेशन करने की अपनी आदत डालिए. रिसाइकलिंग इज़ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग. डोंट थिंक दैट ऑन एवरी पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ अ रेवोल्यूशन यू कैन रिमेंबर हिस्टोरी, वो इम्पॉसिबल टास्क है। और ना ये इस एग्जाम की रिक्वायरमेंट है, हम यहाँ पे कोई एकेडमिक थॉट प्रोसेस लिखने नहीं वाले हैं। सो it was this American Revolution was a manifestation of enlightenment in political, civil and ecclesiastical spheres. तो इसमें आप फर्स्ट पार्ट में क्या लिखोगे, you will specifically talk about enlightenment, you can talk about the enlightenment and the political sphere, और वही सेम आइडियाज आएंगे। जैसे कि जो सबसे फेमस थिंकर थे in this case for the Americans, it was John Locke. जॉन लॉक हैज़ टॉक्ड अबाउट लाइफ, लिबर्टी एंड टू ट्रस्टाइज ऑफ गवर्नमेंट। उन्होंने ये टेस्ट लिखा हुआ है, लाइफ, लिबर्टी एंड टू ट्रस्टाइज ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। इसी से ही अमेरिकन्स का आया लाइफ, लिबर्टी एंड द परसूट ऑफ हैप्पीनेस, राइट, जो फेमस उनका प्रियम्बल का पार्ट है। सो जॉन लॉक has played a very important role in development of the inalienable right to life, liberty and property, and government exists to protect these rights with the consent of the governed. In fact, try to remember this, theory of social contract was also in a way mentioned by John Locke, है ना। तो बहुत सारे लोगों ने theory of social contract लिखी है, थॉमस हॉब्स ने इसके बारे में लिखा है, ठीक है। John Locke has mentioned about this theory of social contract, and finally the most popular is linked to Rousseau. So these writers have played a very important role in creating this spark among the people who were enlightened that how a governance structure should be. In fact, these ideas can be seen directly written, है ना। there were two international जो उनकी continental conferences हुई थी, है ना, in the, and this continental conference became responsible for the declaration of independence. And as all of us can understand, in this continental conference Thomas Jefferson eventually created this declaration of independence, जिसमें लिखा था all men are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights. This was a clear articulation of enlightenment thought process. So political level पे अगर हम देखें, there was a direct linkage with enlightenment. कौन कौन से आइडियाज थे, नेचुरल राइट्स एंड सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, रिजेक्शन ऑफ डिवाइन राइट्स ऑफ मोनार्की, ओके, तो मोनार्की के डिवाइन राइट्स में बिलीव नहीं कर रहे थे बिकॉज दे वर बिलीविंग इन थियोरी ऑफ सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, इट्स अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, ओके, बिटवीन द कम्युनिटी एंड द स्टेट। थर्ड, इक्वालिटी बिफोर लॉ, सो राइट्स फॉर एवरीवन, विच इवेंचुअली विल बी सीन इन द बिल ऑफ राइट्स लेटर ऑन। मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली, एंटी अरिस्टोक्रेसी, है ना, so they were not based upon system of privileges, they were based upon the principle of meritocracy, religious freedom and a secular state model, this is what they believed in, and revolution is enlightenment in action. And finally we see selective application of these ideals. It does not mean that all the ideals were specifically सबका सबको implement कर दिया गया, that is not how it was. So इसी को हमने लिखना है यहाँ पे, ठीक है। रिजेक्शन ऑफ एब्सोल्यूट मोनार्की कैन बी इजीली सीन। इनफैक्ट मोंटेस्क्यूज प्रिंसिपल ऑफ सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर इज द फाउंडिंग स्टोन ऑफ यूएस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन। चेक्स एंड बैलेंसेस वहीं पे इनिशियली आपने पढ़ा भी होगा, अभी आजकल में हमने बात चल रहा है अबाउट द डेडलॉक विच ऑफन हैपन्स इन यूएस। इट हैपन बिकॉज देयर इज कंप्लीट सेपरेशन ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव, लेजिस्लेचर एंड जुडिशियल ब्रांचेस। इनफैक्ट हिस्टोरियन गॉर्डन एस वुड स्टेट्स दैट the revolution was the first modern revolution because it sought to establish a government founded on enlightenment principles of popular sovereignty. So democracy was now to be given the maximum weightage. Enlightenment and the civil sphere, जो कि second keyword हमें यहाँ पे देखने को मिलता है। civil sphere में क्या क्या चीज़ें मिलती है? Number one, equality before law. That was very clear. The focus on reason, the focus on that everyone is going to be equal. In fact, first 10 amendments to the Constitution of America, the first 10 amendments, they are known as the Bill of Rights. उसी को स्पेसिफिकली इन्होंने सारे के सारे अपने फंडामेंटल राइट्स में डेवलप किया। इनफैक्ट अब अगर आप इफ़ यू सी दीज सीरीज विच यू ऑफन फाइंड ऑन नेटफ्लिक्स एक्सेट्रा, दे ऑफन टॉक अबाउट दोज बिल ऑफ राइट्स, द फिफ्थ अमेंडमेंट एक्सेट्रा, which often gives them the fundamental rights. So that can give them freedom of rights of speech, press, assembly, etc. All of them were the ideas of enlightenment. They were also against anti-aristocracy as well as the meritocracy, and they were in favor of aristocracy, in favor of meritocracy. That's in fact we see they were against the system of privileges, and this is how the Rousseau's idea of social equality was taken to some extent. In fact, historian R.R. Palmer says, okay, that American Revolution was a triumph of enlightenment individualism over feudal hierarchy to some extent, because we'll also write some limitation. And the last, it is in the religious sphere. So what do we find? Like Thomas Jefferson came out with Virginia Statute for religious freedom. In fact, इसी principle को बाद में लिखा भी गया था in the first amendment itself, which prohibited any official religion of the state and ensure that everybody is going to have freedom of faith. This is effectively the idea of a secular state. And there was an attack on religious orthodoxy. In fact, many leaders like Jefferson, Franklin Paine, they were influenced by deism. Okay, during the Enlightenment, deism was about the nature worship. Okay, there is a specific religion. We do not require any organized religion. Nature in itself is a rationalist way of saying things. So deism is a rationalist belief emerging from Enlightenment thought. Okay, it's the practice of worshipping reason itself, the nature itself. And historian Jonathan Israel says American revolution was part of radical enlightenment, seeking to establish society based on reason and liberty, including in religious life. So, in this question, let us see one more time. American Revolution, in many respects, a manifestation of enlightenment in political, civil, and ecclesiastical spheres. Explain. So, second part. In many respects means there were some respects in which it was not implementing the ideas of enlightenment. तो वो कौन कौन से हैं वो आपको यहाँ पे mention करने पड़ेंगे. Like number one, we see continuation of slavery. Women were also excluded from political participation, and Native Americans were also marginalized. So this is how the revolution was not very particular in nature. There are many people like Abigail Adams who say that the American Revolution was conservative in nature. Why it was conservative in nature? Because it did want for the political reforms and the economic reforms. It did not go for social radical changes. So that did not happen. In fact, whatever they were fighting for, they had already achieved that before the revolution. So they wanted status quo. They wanted continuation of those things. And like the principle of self-governance was already there. All of these colonies were having their own governors, right? And these kinds of things were already there in America. And this is the major reason, why they wanted to continue with this. So that's why Enlightenment principles were relatively used selectively and in an incomplete manner. In conclusion, you can focus on about Eric Hobsbawm. Okay? Yes, this revolution did apply some of the political and social ideas of the age of enlightenment, but this also gave a practical demonstration of the ideas, even though not without contradictions. कि भाई कुछ limitations बची, जैसे कि political equality का बात किया गया, but equality was not given to women. They talked about equality as a social good, but it was not given to the African slaves, right? So those contradictions could be easily seen. Right to property. In fact, these slaves were considered as property of the whites. There was a specific contradiction which you can see there. So in this question, you can easily see there's a linkage between Enlightenment, American Revolution, and some specific spheres. And since they have said in many respects, means in some respect they did not implement it. So that you can manage, right? And already historical opinions have been given by us to you. You can easily manage this question, the theme in the future. Conclusion के जो हमने principles लिखे एक बार पढ़ लीजिएगा, it will help you out. Question number 1 देखिए अभी इसमें था ना, some suggestive question. Question number 1, this was asked by UPSC in 2014. The question says, do you understand, not 2014, this I think has come recently in the last 2-3 years itself. Do you understand that lack of statesmanship in London during the 1760s and 1770s was an important contributory factor in precipitating the American Revolution? So here you'll talk about the policies which came during 1760s, 1770s, which were not conducive for the relationship between America and Britain. To talk about specific personality like George III, okay, he was the king at this point of time, and the various prime ministers who came and went during this time, like Lord North, the Townshend's policy, all of them, which were a major failure. How they tried to impose too many taxes in too less of a time, starting from 1764, and this created the political crisis, no taxation without representation, the Boston Massacre, etc., all those events. So this question is more about the political events which happened because of lack of statesmanship in London. Second, how far is it correct to say that every feature of American Constitution was ultimately of English origin? So just compare American Constitution with English Constitution. I think you can easily do this with your knowledge of polity. In Indian GS paper 2, we do the comparison of the constitution. So all of you understand कि भाई कुछ similarities and कुछ differences हैं. Similarities क्या क्या है? Both are based upon the principle of democracy that we find. Second similarity क्या मिल सकती है कि it is with respect to the concept of rule of law. So both have the concept of rule of law. So find out those similarity. Okay. फिर कुछ differences हैं बहुत clearly. Federal constitution है, unitary constitution है. यहाँ पे there is a fusion of power जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर गवर्नमेंट है वहाँ प्रेसिडेंशियल है, सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर बेस्ड है. जुडिशरी it is in the case of USA it is independent, in the case of English it is integrative, in the case of the English. So वो सब आप यहाँ पे easily comparison करके लिख सकते हैं. So this is one area which you can easily exploit और easily आप इसके आंसर लिख के देख सकते हैं. ठीक है. So these are the suggestive questions for this topic from our side. Next and the last topic for today is French Revolution. So please see this French Revolution. So see this question. It's a very analytical question that we've given. The French Revolution was not a single event but a process of social restructuring. Evaluate. Okay. So think about how can we do the introduction. Think about the principles of introduction that we've discussed so far today, and on the basis of this, how can we do an introduction of French Revolution. So just think about it. Take 1 minute. Okay, I'm giving you a minute to think about it. So that can give you a broader kind of perspective. तो उसको डिस्कस करेंगे. एक हमने सामने लिखा हुआ इंट्रोडक्शन दैट कुड बी यूटिलाइज्ड, बट थिंक ऑफ योर ओन इंट्रोडक्शन. जितना ज़्यादा आप पर्सनल लेवल के इसको चेंज करना स्टार्ट करेंगे उतना अच्छा आपका मेंटल सेटअप बन जाएगा. ठीक है. सो जस्ट थिंक अबाउट इट. Today actually there was a global server failure, and we use this server known as Cloudflare, and that's why the issue came on portal. But by the next class the problems is not going to be there. Okay, so that's why today we have used the YouTube, but hopefully by the next class problem would not be there. But anyway, think that what were the specific events which we find. Okay, so French Revolution, all of you know the dates. Okay, it starts in May 1789 and eventually it comes to an end with the rise of Napoleon, okay, by 9th of November, and he created the consulate system. So the easiest way of doing introduction is French Revolution was a period of radical political and societal change in France. It began with the summoning of a States General of 1789 and ended with the formation of French consulate in November 1799. It was a long-drawn process involving deep structural changes in society, politics, economy, and ideology. Okay, so why the question is saying it was not a single event? That is very clear. It was not a single event. So if we see this question, introduction करने के आपके पास बहुत सारे methods हैं which you can utilize. सबसे आसान तरीका यही है कि आप go with the timeline. ठीक है, that's the easiest way. Second, you can even mention the French Revolution based upon the ideals of equality, liberty, and fraternity started with the summoning of a States General and it ended with the rise of Napoleon's consulate. That could be one. Or French Revolution has been the greatest, keyword याद करना पड़ेगा, greatest upheaval in the history of Europe, and it helped in ending feudalism and creating a democratic structure across the world based upon the ideas of equality, liberty, and fraternity. So whatever suits you, आप उसके हिसाब से इंट्रोडक्शन यहाँ पे ऐड कर सकते हैं. इंट्रोडक्शन इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी चैलेंज. थोड़ा सा लैंग्वेज क्रैम कर लीजिए, इट इज़ ऑलवेज गोइंग टू बी मोर यूजफुल. ठीक है. नहीं है सर्कमस्टांसेस बता दीजिए कि क्या क्या रीजंस हैं फॉर द क्रिएशन ऑफ दिस फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन. सो आप बहुत इजी एक टॉपिक आपको पता होगा दैट फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन इज फाउंडेशन वाज लेड बाय द फिलोसफर्स बट it came out in open because of the failure of the political class to manage the economic crisis. So that's how you can talk about the circumstances leading to French Revolution. But in this case, since the question is talking more of about social restructuring, meaning it is talking about the consequence, so I would say this level of introduction is better rather than talking about the circumstances, because the question is not talking about the circumstances, it is just talking about the broader process of the French Revolution. So French Revolution, if we see as a whole, if we see the events, the summoning starts from the 5th of May, then the major events, okay, comes by
17th of June, where they declared, the third estate declared itself as the National Assembly. Then the tennis court oath comes by 20th of June, in which they said that we would not go back until we create a constitution. Then this two major demands, one of joint sitting and second of per capita vote, these were accepted by the king with some hesitation, and eventually it led to the next crisis, which is the fall of Bastille. So on 14th of July, we see the fall of Bastille, which solidifies the foundation of the revolution, and nobody is going to question it after this event. Then comes the most defining phase. Okay, so this is the initial phase when the tussle was going on. Okay, like this here they asked this question, that the first phase of the revolution was won by the aristocrats. How? Let me try to make you understand this. Initially, the French people were trying to solve a major economic crisis. That's why the king gave the orders that we should put taxes on the rich people. But the aristocrats did not allow that. In fact, the Paris Parliament refused to register the order of the king. In fact, they gave him the suggestion that he should summon the Estate General. So, Estate General was not summoned as a democratic measure. It was summoned as out of necessity, which was created by the kind of pressure by the aristocracy. Aristocracy thought that just like how they used to meet in the past, three houses will have one single vote, of one of clergy, second of the aristocrats, and the third of the third estate itself as a group. So these two estates are always going to side by one side, and 2 versus 1 will always win. And that's why they had asked for the summoning of Estate General. They didn't allow him to accept the initial demands of the joint sitting as well as the per capita vote. They pressurized king to close the session by putting an end, right? That's why the tennis court oath came from the other side. They were also responsible for putting pressure on the king to dismiss Necker, their finance minister. And finally, till the fall of Bastille, the aristocrats did not allow any meaningful change to happen. That's why the first major part of the French Revolution was dominated by the aristocrats. But after the fall of Bastille, okay, on 14th of July, we see some significant changes. 4th of August, end of system of privileges. So they were abolished. Next, Declaration of Rights on 26th of August. Okay, and the changes did not end here. Okay, they started creating constitution. 1790, they created a constitution for clergy. Okay, so civil constitution for clergy was created. 1791, they tried to draft. The constitution drafting was coming to an end. Then 1792, France was declared as a republic. Monarchy as a principle ended by this time. Then we see reign of terror from 1793 to 1794. The reign of terror would be seen during this period. 1795, we see the beginning of the French Directory, and this French Directory, based upon the constitution, ruled for 4 years. And then came the coup. And the coup eventually was done by Napoleon, and Napoleon became the first consul. So French Revolution, when we see about it, there was a big seesaw which was there from 1789 till 1799. And during the process, it was able to restructure the society. This is the real demand. So first you have to understand the events, and then we can go towards the understanding the demand of the question. So in this part, what you need to do, the focus should be on how the old regime and its inequalities were brought down, feudalism was abolished, declaration of rights, end of the
state system with the beginning of the joint sitting, social religious restructuring, the religion came under the control of the state, secularism became important, rise of the middle class or the bourgeois, and finally the political participation increased. So this is how you can also do some form of graphic. चाहे तो इसको आप सेव कर लीजिएगा. This is going to give you a lot of clarity in the examination. Okay, so यहीं पे आप यही लिखना है कि भाई initially what was the level of social stratification, and then in the second half write about the social restructuring, abolition of feudalism on 4th of August, then declaration of rights on 26th of August, you can write about it, end of estate system with the beginning of the joint sitting, social religious reforms, बहुत सारे social religious reforms हुए, like from 1790 itself the clergy became state paid employees and they had to be elected by people. Okay, now they were secularism became the order of the day. Okay, the vast land holding of the church was taken down, property was auctioned off, reign of terror came, during which we see the rise of multiple things like renaming of street, removal of Christian symbols, republican calendar, all those things, and church influence declined in education, law, and even with respect to marriage. Rise of the middle class, they were now having property ownership, political participation, all those things were there, expansion of political rights in general, like even the working class gained a lot of holding, lot of power during the time of reign of terror, which was led by Robespierre, Maximilian Robespierre. And finally changes in urban society. So all these were the changes, but कुछ limitations बहुत बड़ी थी. क्या क्या थी? Number one, it did not have major impact on the women's rights. Okay, तो वो हमें देखने को मिलता है. And number two, slavery largely continued, जिसको बाद में remove किया जाएगा only during the 19th century. So these are some of the limitations of the process of social restructuring. ये question के अंदर आपको keyword दिया गया है evaluate. So it was not a single event. So that we have discussed that it was not a single event, but a process of social restructuring. तो उसको हमने define कर दिया. Conclusion जब आप लिखने जाएंगे, so you can use the perspective of some historians like Georges Lefebvre says, the revolution was not just a single moment of destruction, but a continuous creation of a new social order. And what were the major things which were underscoring the new society? It ended feudal privileges, it ended the church privileges, clerical privileges, focus on legal and civic equality, and redefining the basis of social identity. In fact, in the conclusion, you can mention on the principles of enlightenment and on the principles of the French Revolution. Naturally, Napoleon went forward and he became responsible for creating the Code Napoleon, which provided certainty to the people, which was a major acceptance of the social changes in France. Okay, major acceptance of the social changes in France. So this is the question from French Revolution. थोड़ा सा हमने डिफिकल्ट सा क्वेश्चन लिया था, बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड नहीं लिया. स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन अगर आप करना चाहें तो ये दो क्वेश्चन हमने आपके लिए रख दिए हैं. ठीक है, द फिलोसफर्स एंड थिंकर्स मे हैव लेड द फाउंडेशन ऑफ फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन बट इट वाज प्रेसिपिटेटेड बाय सोशल एंड इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस. ठीक है, सोशल रीजंस. तो इस बहुत ईजी है, आपको ईजिली आप लिख सकते हैं, है ना. डेविड थॉमसन कहते हैं दैट द role of thinkers in the outbreak of French Revolution is remote and indirect, meaning all these philosophers, Montesquieu, Voltaire, Rousseau, they did not fought in the revolution. They had died by 1778. None of them openly were in favor of revolution against the state. Majority of them were part of bourgeois. They gave ideas, but they never asked for revolution. Yes, they did put pressure on the institutions by criticizing them, but none of them was a revolutionary. So वो first part में लिखेंगे, second part में easily you can mention about social problems and the economic problems. Economic problems being the most important for the outbreak of the revolution. Second, the multiple contradictions that quickly undermined the new edifice had been expressed even before the meeting of a State General in France. The internal conflict among the state had manifested itself, critically examined. So this second question which we have given you, this was a question asked by UPSC in 2015 and it's a little bit complicated to understand, but still in this question you have to mention what were the challenges between, or what were the problems between the three estates. So here you have to mention about these events just that we have just listed in front of you. Okay, the events, that what was the problem? Summoning of a state general. Okay, the people of the third estate came out with two major demands even before beginning of the assembly. We want joint sitting, we want per capita vote, and in fact they also came up with a list of grievances, and that's why on 17th of June they declared themselves as National Assembly and nothing much happened. Just the declaration happened and the conflict continued. On 20th of June, they went for tennis court oath and then eventually they asked for the creation of constitution. Again, nothing much happened. And thereafter the king accepted their demand, but he was not happy with the way the third estate has forced it on him, and that's why until the fall of Bastille things did not work out very well. So these estates were meeting with each other, but nothing resolved. But after that, eventually the conflict came to an end, and finally we see the end of privileges and declaration of rights. So this statement is a bit difficult, this question, but if you understand the events of the French Revolution, it can become easy to understand the process of writing answers. So I hope you must have learned a lot today. These were the 4 major topics which I wanted to cover in today's class. Okay, next class, as per the schedule we are going to have, please take it from Kanchan, and as per the schedule we'll move forward. This is going to be the structure. We'll focus on how to write an introduction, what should be the major points, how to use historiography, how to do conclusion, and what could be the similar kind of questions which you can think about writing. So if you wish, if you are very sincere in the process of preparation, please try to write at least 2 questions out of them. Okay, the questions I have suggested with every topic, so that overall we can have a discussion of suppose around 12 questions. Okay, in detail we had 4, but side questions we also had +2 with every topic. Alright, so this is where we'll end for today, and we'll continue with this series. Those of you who are part of the crash course, we're going to have next class on Thursday, and for those who are just part of the answer writing course, the live answer writing course, we are going to have session on Saturday. Okay, the timing etc will be communicated to you. Please see the portal. This PPT would have been uploaded. The class notes which are there in they will also be uploaded by tomorrow. Okay, so that I will also do. All right. The next day topic, Divya, we are going to cover the next set of topics which are directly connected. American Civil War, British democratic politics, we're going to cover that topic also. Then we'll go forward with Napoleon also, the Napoleon topic we'll cover. And first we'll do Napoleon, then the British democratic politics, American Civil War, Congress of Vienna, then we'll go towards German and Italian unification. These are the 5-6 topics which I would try to take in the next class. All right. These are the probable topics for the next class. Try to revise it, try to write the answers, and try to find that how you can improve. I have given you the principles, and at length we're going to discuss these things again in the classes. Okay, so we'll have 4 classes for world history. Today is the first one. We have 3 more to go, and we'll try to finish the whole topics, and I'm going to give you the broader idea. Okay, so introduction, conclusion, historiography, everything is integrated in these answers. So please use them for your broader next level understanding of the topics, as well as making it a habit for your writing answers. Okay, if you wish to write answers, okay, we also have other courses, test series, daily answer writing, etc. If you wish to do it separately and get it evaluated, but this course is largely for the sake of understanding, right? Thank you so much, and I'll see you on Saturday, and we'll continue with the process. Thank you. Please take care, and please be energetic. Okay, energy is something which is required to clear this examination. Even if some of you may have failed problems in the mains or even at the prelims, but I would advise you strongly, this is the time to regain the energy and then continue with the process till your mains in August 2026. So the next 8-9 months are going to be very important for you. Okay, so thank you so much, and I'll see you, and let us continue with the process of improvement. Thank you.